Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. And in the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with broadcaster and commentator Duncan Barks and journalist Benjamin Butterworth as well, joining us both in the studio. Welcome, both of you. Let's have a look and see what is on the front of some of those papers. Well, Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to invade Gaza City is the top story in Monday's newspaper, which says that the UK has called for a halt to what it calls the path of destruction. The Guardian quotes the United Nations reaction to the move, predicting another calamity in Gaza. And staying with that conflict, the Metro carries social media remarks by the Liverpool footballer Mo Salah about a Palestinian player, Suleiman al-Obaid, who was killed in an Israeli attack on Gaza. Ahead of Friday's Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska, the Financial Times says European leaders are pressing Washington to ramp up sanctions against Moscow. This is the front of The Sun, which says small boat migrants are being offered subsidised boat trips, as well as discounted tickets for the gym, cinema, transport and even massages. While the Express claims entire streets are being lined up to accommodate asylum seekers, at least according to claims by a number of local councils now run by Reform UK. The Daily Mail says 26,000 prisoners have been freed early by Labour in just 7 months, many of them people who had been jailed for more than 10 years. The Telegraph leads with a report that the cost of the UK handing the Indian Ocean Chagos Islands back to Mauritius will be £35 billion, 10 times more than the government had claimed, and that story has previously been reported by Sky News. According to The Times, the government's planning to bring in eye tests every 3 years for drivers over the age of 70. And finally, The Star says Oasis have been warned not to upset Donald Trump ahead of their American leg of their world tour. The headline pun, definitely man baby. Certainly amused all of us here in the studio. So welcome to Duncan Barks and Benjamin Butterworth. Let's just crash straight in with the situation in the Middle East. And the newspaper is the one that you've singled out to talk about first. And this is the UK's reaction to Benjamin Netanyahu's plans that Israel will go in and take the whole of Gaza City. The UK has called for him to halt his plan. Duncan, do you think there's any likelihood that he will listen?
I think this is about Netanyahu's political survival. That's what I think this is about. I don't think necessarily he will listen. He insists the Gaza City plan will end the war. I think he's going to have to convince a lot of people that is the case. As I mentioned a few moments ago, I think it's about his political survival. There is increasingly countries around the world, the UK, Denmark, France, Greece and Slovenia, who have condemned his plans. It's difficult to see how this is ended. I think most viewers to Sky News tonight will maybe just take a step back and say, I just want to stop seeing all of the images that we see on Sky News, we see on the front pages of national newspapers of starving adults, but also children, particularly in Gaza. And I think that's what's driving a lot of people. And I think increasingly Netanyahu is losing support for what he's doing.
I mean, he's certainly losing support internationally. I think what's been remarkable and probably dangerous to Israel, even after this war ends, if it is possible for it to end, is that it has alienated its allies. Countries like Britain, France, Canada have now spoken out against them and against this Gaza City plan. But even back in Israel, although this is stirring up a section of support in Israeli society that gives him a hope of the impending general election that Israel will have, actually the families of hostages, and there's 50 hostages still there, 20 of them are thought to be alive, they have called for a national strike in Israel, so everybody to quit their jobs for a day or two in order to get the message home to try and stop this. And the reason they're saying that is because they fear that the moment this military action to take control of Gaza City happens, they'll just, in their words, put a bullet in the heads of the remaining living hostages. Now, that tells you something else, of course, which is sometimes forgotten because of the awful images we see from Gaza, which is just how evil Hamas is and how, they were using these people as human hostages for 674 days. And so you also can't forget in all this that Israel is living with pure evil next door. The leadership of Hamas has said that on any opportunity it will attack Israel, it will kill the Jewish people. And so there has to be a solution that means getting rid of Hamas. The question is how severe that is for the quote-unquote regular Gazans, regular Palestinians that are living there. And I think the part of this jigsaw that is maybe most dangerous is that it will have surely radicalised all sorts of other people in the region, a younger generation that are going to continue the atrocities and the evil of Hamas. And how does Israel live in the medium term with that situation?
And if we move on to The Guardian, Duncan, its headline has this really striking image of it, a man mourning after more Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces, and the fact that the UN is calling it another calamity. And we heard today from the UN, from Palestinian representative in the UN and from America, all treading the same path, really. It doesn't appear that the diplomacy or very strong words, and we've heard so many incredibly powerful words coming from these UN meetings, seem to make a shred of difference. And
it goes back to the point that Ben made a few moments ago. You know, Netanyahu in Israel is increasingly isolated when it comes to its allies around the world. And it's difficult to see, particularly with the UN officials raising their concerns and these warnings as well, kind of how far he's prepared to go with this and how much support he's going to have.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that, you know, in terms of America and its influence on Netanyahu, nothing seems to be changing there.
No. I think Netanyahu made his mind up a long time ago that he wasn't going to listen. But look, you know, he has also had some remarkable success at times when other countries weren't supporting. So, you know, the success with the change of government in Syria, which was a consequence, taking out so much of Hezbollah's power, its attacks on Iran. You know, I was in Israel when the Iran-Israel war broke out not long ago, and it was remarkably effective at dealing with Iran and the threat and the perception of power. And actually, earlier today, there was a march for the hostages in central London, which I went to. And what has to be said is that every single person that came up to me was saying about how, as Jews in Britain, they feel like anti-Semitism has been legitimised in the West and in this country, and that they feel fearful and can't go about their daily lives in a way that they could a few years ago. And I think, you know, what's happening in Gaza is there are many legitimate questions and criticisms, but there are too many people who have taken this as a hatred of the state of Israel and a hatred of the Jewish diaspora. And I think a lot of British Jews feel like they've been forgotten and they feel abandoned by their country at the moment. The
ripples of October the 7th and what happened on that day, you know, just spread further and further, don't they? Let's move away from that and into another big international story. And this is the front of the Financial Times, and this is the situation in Ukraine. Looking ahead to this meeting on Friday in Alaska between President Putin and Donald Trump. Will Zelensky be there? We don't know, do we?
Well, we don't know, but he should be there. I mean, it's preposterous, this idea that you have Putin and Trump rocking up in Alaska and the man whose country is going to be debated regarding its future and possibly some kind of end to the war is not going to be there. It's utterly absurd. So I think Zelensky does need to be there. We've had various reports over the last 48 hours about what Trump's plan may or may not be, but there has been some reports coming out that there should be some concessions and Russia should be allowed to keep some of the land it has invaded illegally as a way of ending this war. And I think that can't be allowed to happen because there is an argument, which is if you allow Russia to somehow keep the land that it's invaded, you are rewarding the aggressor. And we know there's a track record to this. We saw it in 2014 with Crimea. Now it's annexed as well. Nothing was really done about it. So if you go down this line of thinking, which is, well, in order to try and stop this particular conflict in Ukraine, we need to allow Putin to keep hold of some of the stuff that he's nicked off the Ukrainians, it's just absurd.
And in terms also of Putin kicking the can down the road, Benjamin, sanctions were meant to be brought in on Friday, but by agreeing to this meeting, he's managed to delay that yet again. He does seem rather adept at managing President Trump, doesn't he?
And it's yes, indeed. In fact, the alarming part is that Trump seems almost sycophantic to Putin at times. He seems quite weak-willed about him in a way that he revels in being the opposite with every other world leader. And so, you know, obviously the Ukrainian leader should be at the table because it's his country they're talking about. But you wonder whether the intent of that is because Trump is more interested in doing a deal with Putin and less interested in the complicated matters of Ukraine keeping its land. And Zelensky said yesterday that there can be no land swap because it would have to go to the Ukrainian people because it would be a constitutional amendment. So even if there was some scenario where the political leadership agreed, you'd have to persuade the regular Ukrainians in a public vote. But also, it's worth noting that Russia is the most sanctioned country in the world already. And in the last year, its economic growth was nearly 5%. So most of that was from sort of military production that's helped its economy. But the sort of deflection towards China has really helped Russia survive. And so while it's understandable and rational that European leaders want these sanctions, actually so far it's far from crippled Russia's economy. And so will it actually work?
We shall see. Thank you both so much for that first few selections. We've got lots more to come, though, after the break, including can you overdo solar energy? It seems Spain might have done. We'll discuss more after the break.
I want to start the programme today with an aim, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people this is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, but
I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it?
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want them to be treated equally like everyone else.
It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Are you diminished by claims that you're a racist?
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides. And it's moving this way.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome back. You're watching the Press Preview. And joining us this evening, the broadcaster and commentator Duncan Barks and the journalist Benjamin Butterworth. We've been roaring through them. Back to the Telegraph. Duncan, you picked out a story that's just right down at the bottom of the page in the Telegraph, just a little news and brief there. But this is about photographs of shoplifters and how shops are not allowed to put them in their windows.
No, we're not allowed to know who these people are who are going into shops and nicking things. So I have a particular interest in this. I've seen in my local convenience store people walking in with those big bags that you get from a well-known Swedish superstore and clearing stuff off the shelves. Not challenged at all because the staff have been told we're not allowed to challenge people for our own safety.
You didn't want to challenge them.
I didn't know what to do, but I was so shocked with what I saw.
I don't know what I would do.
But also, just related to this, sausages in this convenience store, which is a well-known chain, are now in clear Perspex boxes with GPS trackers attached to them to try and stop and deter shoplifting. All right? So you have this bit of advice here that's on the website for the Information Commissioner's Office saying to people who work in shops or run shops, no. What you can't do, if you have a known shoplifter, you can't put a picture of them and their name up in the shop because it will breach data protection laws.
But you can't put them in the window.
In the window.
But maybe you could put them behind the counter so the staff could see them.
But maybe. But, I mean, I think what you need to do is name and shame these people because that's the only way you're going to stop this epidemic of shoplifting, which I believe is happening all the time.
And also, if it breaches supposedly data protection rules, who's going to bring that case?
Yeah.
What, is the shoplifter going to come forward and say, how dare you? I mean, what would be the reality of this scenario? It's absurd. But I do think, I mean, on Saturday's Telegraph, there was a story that police had told a shopkeeper that put a notice in his window saying, scumbag shoplifters not allowed. And they told him you can't call them scumbags. I mean, really, I don't think this is the main issue most people are concerned about, right? How you refer to these people that steal. And I was saying this...
Probably more concerned about the fact that shops are putting their prices up because they're having to deal with all the lost stock.
Cover the shoplifting.
Exactly. And, of course, most people will be angry at the shoplifters and not the language used about them. But last night, I think there's just this... I had this scenario last night which just told of a Britain where low-level crime, quote-unquote, is tolerated. Because I was walking through Leicester Square, not somewhere I'd usually be on a Saturday night, and as I was walking through from Chinatown, which is near London's Leicester Square, 3 different people tried to give me their phone numbers to sell drugs and then said they had a knife if I didn't take it. Then I was sort of knocked back and forth by some people as I walked into Leicester Square who were claiming to be drug dealers. I then go to McDonald's to get my chicken nuggets, which is why I was there at 2 a.m.
You're living the life.
Exactly. But then I witness a chase go past me from what looked like someone who'd just been mugged trying to chase 2 guys that had stolen from him. Then I turned to my left and there's some lads sat there openly taking drugs. And then I see some people using laughing gas. Not in this whole half-an-hour episode on my way through Leicester Square did I see a single uniformed police officer. And I just couldn't believe it because it was sort of every so-called low-level crime that goes on, all happening around like some kind of dystopian film. And then I went up to some officers on a street nearby to say that, that is absolutely crazy what's going on. It's, probably the most famous square in London. There's no police officers. There's all this lawlessness. And the officer was very nice, but he said, we just don't have the resource to deal with it, which I don't know if that's a good enough excuse because surely it should be a priority. But I, having lived in London in 15 years, had never seen such brazen law-breaking and not one police officer strolling the streets. And I think when you get that scenario, when the officer says, oh, we don't have the resource, well, that's when they, threaten people with a knife in the street or steal from the local supermarket because they go, oh, well, they won't bother to take us on.
Which segues slightly into the Daily Mail story. 26,000 prisoners freed early by Labour. In just 7 months, hundreds of people have been freed, and a lot of these are people serving sentences of more than 10 years.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all remember the images that we saw earlier this year when we saw these people being released, popping champagne corks or being picked up in very flashy sports cars. And I think there's a general sense in this country, and I feel it, and you've just outlined, Ben, what you experienced last night, that the government, the authorities, really have lost the grip when it comes to law and order in this country. Now, you can debate long and hard, why are we releasing 26,000 prisoners early? Because there's a lack of prison spaces. Successive governments are blamed for that. I'm old enough to remember various governments of all kinds of political stripes, including the coalition of 2010, going, we're going to build more prison spaces. It never happens, for all kinds of reasons. Consequently, we find ourselves in a situation where you have 26,000 prisoners being released early, and it just feeds into this narrative that I think a lot of viewers have and now feel, which is when it comes to law and order, we haven't got a grip on it anymore.
Yeah, it feels like there aren't consequences. But I have to say, I find the front page a bit dubious because the reason there's a lack of police cells to put people in, the reason they're being freed early is because there were a handful left in July when the previous government left. And so I think it's opportunistic of the Daily Mail to blame the Labour Party when it's not a party's decision.
OK, very briefly, because we've got less than a minute left, but the front of the FT has got these images of solar panels and apparently Spain has a solar glut. Basically, they have too much sun, too many solar panels.
Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be good news for Ed Miliband, who's our energy secretary, who's a big fan of solar panels and solar energy and stuff, but this story really speaks for itself. Spain burnt by solar glut. I'm quite a fan of solar panels, but I don't want to see them all over fields in this country where we should be growing food.
And the value of them is plummeting, apparently. Apparently, they did used to be worth £200,000. Now they're just worth £30,000, the actual solar projects themselves, which is a real tumble.
Yeah, and we had that story where Spain's electricity went out for, I think, like half a day because the system malfunctioned because it works in different ways to traditional electricity systems. And so, you know, Spain is...
Solar panels are to blame for that, though, we should say.
Well, it's leading the way in this healthy, in this environmental electricity, but is it safer?
Benjamin, Duncan, thank you both so much. We'll speak to you again at 11:30. Thank you so much. Let's get a look at the weather.